Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey. So GDC has wrapped up, and as usual there are some interesting news. Specifically, there's more detail on what is coming out with Unity 6 later this year. There's lots of info on lots of topics. Things on rendering, on samples, AI, there's a bunch of multiplayer, dots, and even some details on what's coming on after Unity 6. Unity sponsored this video to do a quick summary of everything that was announced, everything that is coming in the future, as well as to let you know about two really awesome things that they recently published. There is the Megacity Metro. This is a fully functioning multiplayer game sample using netcode for entities and lots of multiplayer tools. It's all fully working, it's got interpolation, lag compensation, all kinds of things. You can download it for free and inspect all the code with a link in the description. And also the Unity 2024 Gaming Report. This is an excellent report with a ton of info on all kinds of topics, mainly all in the 5 trends that are shaping game development right now. So learn about how studios are adopting AI to save time, how they are diversifying their revenue, how studios of all sizes are shipping to more platforms, how they are prioritizing multiplayer games despite complexity and cost, and how the industry is building stronger bands by extending engagement. This is a truly massive report. Look at this, it's a mountain of info. So definitely check it out. You can read the entire report for free with a link in the description. Now let's go through everything that Unity showcased at GDC. Actually did a fun live watch along. Thanks to everyone who joined me during that. It was certainly interesting to watch a roadmap and give my thoughts live. So first let's begin with the name itself, Unity 6, which you might already know. But they also explain a little bit more about the naming scheme going forward. Right now you can already go and download the Unity 6 beta. Just go to your Unity hub, install the editor, go under pre-release, and yep, here is Unity 6 beta. This is basically the same as previous betas, meaning this version is on the bleeding edge. It is only meant for experimentation, not something you should use in production. For that, then coming in May is going to be Unity 6 Preview. This is what was previously called the tech stream. The preview version will have all of the features of Unity 6. So this is basically just a polishing and bug fixing phase. After that, it will have no breaking changes. So this one, the Unity 6 Preview, this one can already be used in production. And finally, towards the end of the year, comes out Unity 6. This is going to be the full release. I'm guessing maybe around October, September, that's usually when they launch a version. And this Unity 6 version is basically an LTS version. As always, the advice for you is quite simple, use the latest LTS version. So for me right now, I'm still mainly using the 22 LTS version. Then in May, when the Unity 6 Preview comes out, I'll switch to that one, and then update to the full Unity 6 release later on in the year. Also, one interesting tidbit of information. In the roadmap talk, they talked about how the Unity 6 cycle is going to be longer than the current LTS. So that makes me think that Unity 6 will be out sometime by the end of this year, but there's probably not going to be a Unity 7 next year. So that LTS version is going to be supported for longer, which is great news if you like to stick with one particular version without having to constantly update. Now on to rendering. They showed off some really awesome tools that they first unveiled at Unite a few months ago. Unity 6 is getting a bunch of basically free performance checkboxes. You've got the GPU Resident Drawer. Basically this uses the GPU in order to render large scenes much more efficiently. Then related to that is GPU occlusion culling. This one is super fast and makes sure to only render things that are actually visible. And spatial and temporal post-processing. This is their upscaler, which provides excellent performance while having no negative visual impact. So basically, if you enable all of these, you get massive performance essentially for free. Personally, I love these three. I am not a graphics programmer. I can't really write manual shaders or computer shaders or complex stuff like that. And those are usually the things that you need to do if you want extreme performance. So for me, basically just having to take a checkbox and my game basically runs 50% faster, that sounds really awesome. This alone would be a great reason to look forward to Unity 6. Being able to make better games that look and run better sounds really great. But if you are a graphics programmer and you want to dive deep into how all of that works, you can still do that. You can extend the SRPs with your own custom code in order to get it looking exactly as you want it. You can create your own custom post-processing effects using shader graph. And in VFX Graph, you can use a custom HLSL block, basically allowing you to run your own custom shader logic directly inside VFX Graph. Then, to make sure that your graphics are performing at their best, you have these three tools. The Render Graph View, to be able to view each individual rendering layer, rendering step, how all the passes are going through, and specifically how long each pass is taking. Then you have the Shader Graph Heat Map. So just at a glance, you can look at the colors of some nodes and be able to see, is this an expensive node or a cheap node? And the VFX Graph Profiling tool. This one lets you analyze your VFX graphs to see how you can improve upon it. So basically, if you're like me and you don't know much about graphics programming, you can just take a bunch of checkboxes and everything runs much faster. But if you are a graphics programmer, then you can dive deep and get it running exactly as you want it. Then a fun addition is the VFX templates. This one will be very useful to me personally. I make lots of tutorials and various one-off projects. And every time I need to make something like some kind of particle explosion effect, I always have to make it from scratch. So having these templates is going to save me quite a bit of time. And both Shader Graph and VFX Graph are getting a bunch more usability improvements, adding the ability to generate nice dynamic UI backgrounds with Shader Graph, or handle collisions, decals, lighting, ray tracing, or even volumetric fog with VFX Graph. Another awesome graphics tool that I'm very much looking forward to is this one, Adaptive Pro Volumes. This is their global illumination tool for giving you really high quality, both direct and indirect lighting. Basically, it automatically places hundreds or thousands of probes throughout your entire world, and then basically uses those to calculate both the direct and indirect lighting. So you end up with some really gorgeous scenes with both lighting and bounce lighting all over the place. Now, from what I understand, this is not in real time. However, you can bake multiple scenarios and then swap between them. So we can see here an example of a time of day, so a day-night system. And yep, everything looks really great. It goes from full daytime to full nighttime and everything interpolates perfectly. And the GPU Light Baker is also getting some nice improvements to help cut down the bake time, while also supporting lower-end devices, which should help improve things for pretty much anyone. Then the water system is also continuing to get a bunch of improvements. This one looks really awesome. If you have oceans or big lakes in your game, definitely check it out. Now, sadly, it only works with HDRP. I assume that's a requirement because of the so many interesting effects that it has. But if you need a URP water system, if so, you can download their Boat Attack free demo. You can download this one and just grab the shader from there. Another HDRP only feature are their night sky and atmospheric tools, basically making some really gorgeous skies. The results are really excellent, and again, all super high quality with very interesting effects. Or if you use SpeedTree, that one is also getting a bunch of improvements alongside a better integration with the editor. For me, I've never used SpeedTree myself. My games usually don't have any trees, so I'm not too familiar with these updates, but they do look quite interesting. One really awesome, really important thing coming out is how, starting in Unity 6, the SRPs, both URP and HDRP, these are going to be the defaults. So basically, when you create an empty brand new project, when you do that, it will probably ask you to select either URP or HDRP and default to one of those, as opposed to what it is right now, where by default it selects the built-in render pipeline. I think this is a really excellent change. I get comments on my videos pretty much every single week talking about pink assets. Even on my Kitchen Chaos course, even there when I made sure to go step by step very carefully in order to make sure that people install the correct template, even with that, people still accidentally install the default one. So I'm very, very happy to see this change. Hopefully that means no more beginners being very confused as to why their entire scenes are pink. But also at the same time, these are also good news if you are still using the built-in render pipeline. If you do, then that one is still going to be supported throughout Unity 6. So if you intentionally like using that render pipeline, if you already have tons of custom shaders, custom tools that were made specifically for that, if so, you can definitely keep using it for a very long time. Then actually some fun stats. Of all games released in PC and console in 2023, of those, 90% are using the SRPs. So that's either URP, URP in 2D, URP in 3D, or HDRP. It's actually funny how it's pretty much evenly split between all three of those. I thought these stats were actually quite a bit lower. I thought the SRPs were only at about 50%, so I'm definitely happy to see they're at 90%. With that in mind, I guess it makes sense as to why they're now going to switch into defaulting to the SRPs. And if you want to learn about URP, you can right now go ahead and download both the 3D and the 2D samples for it. There's a 3D sample that came out a few months ago. It shows some really awesome use case for URP. You've got a realistic scene, one with some really interesting lighting, and one with a bunch of stylized lighting. All of those scenes are all in just one project. And then for 2D, there is the 2D Happy Harvest project. I made a really detailed walkthrough video on this sample when it came out. It's a great sample if you want to dive deep and see how all of the 2D tools that Unity has, how all of those are used to make this project. And beyond that, there's also a ton of samples, both for URP and HDRP. You can download them from the package manager. These cover lots of topics, so definitely go ahead and inspect those if you want to learn more about these. So already quite a lot of stuff just over here on rendering. Some of it is already out right now, and some is coming in Unity 6. Then of course, since we are in 2024, we have to talk about AI. And their Muse toolset is actually improving quite nicely. They began by once again clarifying all of their input datasets, how they own or license everything they use. I think that's a really great thing. That eliminates a very serious doubt on some developers' minds, wondering whether they can use something or not due to copyright issues, because they do own all the input datasets, all the outputs are all safe to use. Muse Sprite is supposedly improving. I must say, when I first checked it out myself, which was about 6 months ago, back then the results were definitely very limited. So I really hope it has improved a lot since I last checked it out. Muse Texture did get indeed a massive improvement just recently. They made an entire blog post about it, comparing differences between version 1.0 and version 2.0. And over here you can definitely see quite a massive improvement in the model, and this is only just in about 6 months, so this definitely looks really good. If Sprite gets a similar upgrade to this one, then it's going to be really awesome. And then they also talked about a texture 3D tool. Now I'm not a 3D artist myself, so I'm not entirely sure what exactly this is. Apparently, I guess you give it a 3D model, give it the UV for that model, and the model is smart enough in order to be able to generate a texture that fits that particular model, that particular UV, whilst at the same time generating actual PBR textures. If that is the case, then yep, that does sound extremely impressive. Right away, my initial thought is that means that you can buy some assets on the store, and then use this tool to generate tons and tons of variations for it. If it works exactly like that, then that really sounds awesome. My next question is, does it work with low poly things, which is usually the sound that I prefer? I hope so, so I'm definitely planning to try it out. These three tools are already available right now, and coming in Unity 6 are these three. There's Muse Behavior. This one lets you use natural language in order to generate a behavior tree. It sounds really interesting, makes me wonder just how extensible it is. So does it work with really complex state machines or only works for simple things? One real interesting thing is how it actually generates the code, and you can apparently inspect all of that code. Then Muse Animate, this is the one that I'm really excited for, really looking forward to. Being able to very quickly generate a whole ton of animations for some kind of prototype, that sounds like an excellent time saver. When making prototypes, iteration speed is key, so being able to just generate something, as opposed to having to go onto the asset store and browse tons and tons of packs with tons of animations, being able to just generate one that you need right now, that sounds really great. You can generate animations from text, but also coming out later this year is apparently generating animations from sketches and videos. This sounds extremely interesting. Being able to draw a sketch would probably work out quite a lot better than having to describe it using text. So I'm very curious to see how this one works out in the end. And yet another AI tool, sound effects. Like the name implies, this lets you turn natural language into actual sound effects. Again, another super useful tool for helping you iterate upon your prototype super quickly. That really is my main takeaway for all of these AI tools, how they help you build really awesome prototypes really quickly. So anytime you've got an idea for some kind of interesting game, you can very quickly get it working. You can generate sprites, behavior trees, animations, sounds, generate all of that and very quickly test out your ideas. When the project does get into production, at that point you probably want some professional assets, but for the prototyping stage, these sounds really awesome. And something really awesome that they announced during this roadmap is how all of these tools are now much more integrated in the editor, specifically Muse Chat. This one you previously had to go to a separate website outside of Unity in order to interact with it, whereas in Unity 6 it will be integrated directly inside the editor. And with that comes actually a huge bonus. It means that Muse Chat is project aware, meaning you can write prompts specifically to your specific project and get some very specific solutions for whatever problem you're trying to solve. This is the kind of thing that I think is really awesome, especially for beginners. Beginners usually have trouble figuring out how various systems connect to one another, so having a tool that understands how exactly the project is structured and how to connect all of those, that should really help out. Or for simply asking it to solve some error, it has context of the project, so it should be much better at helping you solve each specific error. And they're also working on third-party integrations of various AI tools, again making it all integrated directly inside the editor. This one does sound really interesting. I know there are tons and tons of AI tools out there, some of which could indeed be very useful. I wonder if this also means that we will be able to build tools on top of Muse. So I wonder maybe Muse Chat could have some kind of API that you could hook onto in order to build your own tools on top of it. That would definitely be quite interesting. They also continue mentioning Centis. This is their runtime AI inference engine. Basically lets you run AI models directly on device as opposed to running it in some cloud somewhere. It's amazing how this tool exists. It seems technically very impressive, although honestly I haven't yet seen some kind of killer app for it. All the use cases so far just seem like small gimmicks. Something that might help change that is how they're apparently working with Hugging Face in order to tag models that work directly with Unity Centis, meaning that with that you might be able to have an easier time finding some interesting models and just directly apply it to your game to do some kind of interesting things. And in general, more performance improvements, memory savings, and so on. Then they had a section on tiny but really awesome performance improvements for day-to-day tasks. The input system is getting project-wide input actions, basically presets for helping you get started faster. This is a small but a really nice thing. Normally for my prototypes I still use the legacy input manager just because it's so easy to use. But with these presets, maybe that won't change that. Then improvements on jobs profiling, being able to track dependencies and view all of them in the profiler. And addressables also getting some more settings. And again, something that helps improve your iteration speed is incremental build support. As far as I know, this feature is already out right now, but apparently in Unity 6 it is going to become even faster and work directly on consoles. Build profiles is another really awesome one, something that people have wanted for a very long time. Having the ability to create profiles directly for each specific platform in order to make the builds in different ways. This is something that previously you had to build some really complex editor scripts to make this happen. So being able to have this directly into the engine, this one is really awesome, great time saver. And a new platform browser, which apparently lets you browse all the platforms that Unity supports and very automatically install all the packages related to those platforms. So in all, a bunch of tiny improvements that help you during your regular day-to-day tasks. Another big focus for Unity this year is multiplayer. One of the awesome things coming out in Unity 6 is the Multiplayer Center. This is a way to help simplify the process of selecting what packages to install and installing them all at once. You select some kind of game genre template, and then recommend some specific tools that would be great for that specific genre. You select them all and with one click install everything and download some samples. I think this is really great, especially for beginners who want to very quickly get started making multiplayer games without having to know about all of these tools. Just press one button and everything works automatically. Another thing to help simplify that process is the Multiplayer Services SDK. This is essentially a unified SDK to work with all of the various multiplayer tools that Unity has. So instead of having to individually work with each one of these services, instead of that you just work with one SDK and interact with all of them. Again, I think this is really great for simplifying multiplayer development. Then tons of quality of life improvements. There's the multiplayer play mode. This one basically spawns different instances of Unity so you can easily test between them. Each of them has their own console, their own logs, so you no longer need to make separate builds and go through that entire process. There's also an easier integration of Relay directly inside the network manager. This makes it really quickly to have a playtester or maybe another developer directly connect to your game and test things out. Similar thing for game server hosting, basically dedicated servers. Instead of having to manually make a build and manually go on the web dashboard in order to manually upload your build, instead of that, just press a button and everything happens automatically. They're also introducing a new authority mode, distributed authority. Right now you can have just a single host or a dedicated server. So basically right now all the authority is in just one place, whereas with this one, with distributed authority, with this one you can basically split the multiplayer synchronization workload across multiple clients. This helps make more complex multiplayer games possible without having to require a ton of resources or just multiplayer dedicated servers. And that also makes me wonder, does this also help make larger scale multiplayer games? So could I have a giant world where perhaps one player is one side of the world, another player in a completely different side, and since they have authority over the things around them, maybe that works quite a lot better. Another useful thing, especially for small teams, is safe voice and safe text. Basically, these are automatic moderation tools. They help you identify and stop toxic players, which is a huge help, especially for small teams who can't really afford to have an entire dedicated moderation team. Oh, and of course, related to multiplayer, there is the Megacity Metro sample. This one is made using netcode for entities. It supports 128 players, supports interpolation and all kinds of things like compensation, prediction, and so on. This is a complete sample. You can download it to check it out, so definitely check out the link in the description. Then lots of stuff on XR, AR, VR, all of this. This is one area that I still haven't had the time to research. I really want to find the time for it. There's lots of continued improvements on pretty much anything. It's really amazing how this one is constantly building new things. Tons of templates, tons of samples, tons of stuff. There's improvements to meshing, occlusion, bounding boxes, persistent anchors, and so on. And there's even a multiplayer VR temple to help you get started making multiplayer VR social games. This one looks like a really great starting point for making all kinds of fun prototypes. And something that looks really awesome is play to device. It looks especially awesome, exactly the demo that they showcased. Basically there's someone on, I imagine is some kind of Apple Vision Pro, and they are basically doing some kind of level design directly on their side, interacting with some kind of visual element, and it's matching both the thing that they see on their side as well as the thing they see on their screen. So in terms of level design, this sounds like a really fun way to do it. I must say, when I first heard about the Apple Vision Pro, I wasn't really all that interested, especially given the very expensive price. But the more use case that I see about it, the more it makes me want to get one. Although it's really still super expensive. And either way, even if I want to buy it, it's still not available here in Portugal, but who knows, maybe one day. This use case does sound quite interesting. And related to platforms, also mobile web support, basically allowing your Unity games to run on the web anywhere, even including on mobile browsers. Also supporting WebGPU. This is a new experimental standard for basically allowing the web, basically your browser, to be able to access your GPU directly. This allows you to use compute shaders to do all kinds of really complex things. If this one does become the standard, then web games are going to be really awesome in the future. And if you work as part of the team, then these cloud asset solutions, these look potentially quite useful. For me, normally I work by myself, so these kinds of tools don't really work too well in my workflow. But if you do work as part of the team, definitely explore these tools. And near the end, they mentioned Dots, how it's already supported for production. It's been that way for a while. Importantly is this slide where it clearly mentions that they are committed to the Dots ecosystem for the long term. They've already put out several updates and one more coming in the future. So this is definitely something that is already really solid right now and is going to continue to get tons of improvements. I'm a really big fan of Dots. Right now I'm still working on finishing up the advanced section for my C# course, but after that's done, for my next course I definitely want to make a complete game using Dots. Maybe an automation game, maybe an RTS game, still not sure on the exact genre, but I'm definitely looking forward to using Dots in a complete project. Then they mentioned some funny stats on how 100% of productions could use more performance out of the box. And of course, that's always the case. Even if your game is already very optimized, you could always use more performance. One thing that I'm looking forward to with regards to Dots is a feature where Unity themselves implements Dots in the backend of the engine, so that even developers who don't want to directly interact with Dots, they can still get the massive benefits from it. Like for example, in a future, you'll be able to use something like the navigation in order to do some kind of pathfinding. You'll work with that using game objects, just like right now, except in the background, I will be using Dots in order to make it really efficient, really performant. That feature sounds really awesome to me. It means you can keep building games just like you've always done using game objects, but in the background, everything will be so much faster. Speaking of the feature, they also shared some details on what's coming on after Unity 6, and it's partly what I just said, bringing game objects and entities closer together, meaning the feature is not 100% game objects or 100% dots, it's a hybrid approach between both of them. So the goal of making the ECS power available for editor tooling, using ECS where it matters, or providing data-oriented benefits to pretty much every project. Then there's an interesting slide talking about how game objects are also entities. I assume this means that in the future, when we create a game object, it will automatically create a linked entity and link to that game object. And with that, you'll be able to make transforms in various systems between game objects and entities, as well as being able to use regular monobehavior components alongside ECS components. And specifically, some of the topics they are currently working on is animation and world building, using ECS in the background to make these tools really performant. Again, keep in mind this is all after Unity 6, so these are very much long-term goals. Then beyond Unity 6 is also something they're working on for quite some time now, upgrading the engine foundation to Core CLR. Now, I'm not too familiar on Core CLR, but from what I understand, it's the .NET execution engine, meaning it's what actually runs the .NET C# code with all the garbage collection and all of that. In terms of practical benefits, it leads to faster iteration time with faster compiling. You get better runtime performance with tons and tons of modern optimizations, and of course making it feature-proof. I believe this makes it easier for Unity to keep up to date with the various C# versions exactly as they are coming out. So yep, that's the roadmap. Personally, I think it looks really great. These rendering improvements will make my games run much faster even though I'm not a graphics programmer. The AI tools are looking extremely useful for very quickly getting a prototype up and running. Multiplayer continues improving and becoming easier and easier to use. Unity continues working on literally every platform that exists. Dots already has a really solid core and is continuing getting improvements for the long term, as well as lots of general improvements improving your day-to-day productivity. The Unity 6 beta is out right now. You can download it from Unity Hub. The Unity 6 preview will be coming out in May, and then the full release, I'm guessing around October, November, something like that. And just a brief mention, since I'm sure someone will ask about the runtime fee. I covered all the details in my last video during that whole saga. Basically, TLDR is the fee only applies after 1 million copies sold and 1 million in revenue. So personally, right away, that means I really don't have to worry about it at all. I have actually made more than $1 million with my games, but that is over the course of 10 years and 9 games. And of course, I haven't got anywhere close to 1 million copies sold. So really, for me and indie devs on the same scale as me, which I assume is most of the audience on this channel, if so, these thresholds are really so massive that you really don't need to worry about it. The fee will never apply to you or to me. But even if it does, then quite simply, the fee is capped at 2.5%. So even if you do go past these really massive limits, if so, at the absolute worst, you pay 2.5%. And something very good with Unity 6, something that people have wanted for a very long time, is how you will be able to have no splash screen on the free personal version. This is something that tons of people have wanted for a very long time, and starting in Unity 6, yep, we can now do this. So that's a feature of Unity 6 for this year and beyond. Don't forget to check out the Mega City Metro sample. You can download it for free with a link in the description. And same thing for the 2024 Unity Gaming Report. This is a report with a mountain of useful info, so definitely take your time to go through it. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.